So hello, welcome. Thank you everyone for coming to today's webinar. My name is Quinn Klarer, Product Manager here at Symetrix. So real quick, just a few short housekeeping notes, just so you know. Throughout this presentation, there is a live Q&A section that you are more than welcome to throw any questions that you might have into it as we go along. We have people standing by that are ready to answer those questions. And then at the end, I'll try to get to as many of them as I can, as there is a quick little dedicated question and answer time that we'll have. So just to start off a little bit, to give a little background information on Symetrix in case you are new here. Symetrix is a Seattle-based engineering company. We were founded in 1976, and our roots really began in the recording studio, creating hardware tools that were used in recording and production processes. But over the years, over the past 5 decades or so, we've really grown a lot from providing audio solutions for what some might consider a niche market to where we are today by providing complete audio, video, and control solutions for much larger enterprise deployments. Over that time, over those that past 5 decades or so, we've also been working in the backgrounds developing what we think is really going to be the next generation of audio, video, and control platforms. And that's what we're going to be talking quite in depth about today. So our new platform is called Cognio. And Cognio introduces new hardware. It has new software. And it even has a new way that we handle firmware and the way that we communicate to different devices. All of this has been built from the ground up. We're using modern communication protocols. And really, Cognio acts as a way to provide a new way to create solutions for our customers, as well as our customers' customers, of course. And while there is quite a lot to discuss about how our hardware and our firmware on their own are designed in very completely unique ways, today I'm going to be focusing on the Cognio DesignOps software and specifically highlighting some of the unique workflows that we've built into the software that we think are going to change the way a lot of you approach the way you create solutions for your customers. So if you are interested in the platform as a whole, we do have 2 on-demand webinars available that I encourage you to go see. The platform on its own is really interesting, and it gets into a lot of the nitty-gritty of how it works. We'll be sharing a link after this webinar that has all of that for you, so you can just pull it up, click into it, and see the whole platform overview. So looking at the Cognio DesignOps software, as we were developing it, we wanted to push ourselves to not create something derivative of other design softwares. There's always been a traditional look and feel to the way that you use open architecture design software. And while there is a lot of good in those types of software, there's also a lot of pain points across all of them. What we wanted to do is we wanted to take the creation of DesignOps as an opportunity to address a lot of those pain points. And we accomplished this by creating a few guiding principles that help shape pretty much every decision that we made. If we were going to put something in this, we looked and saw, how is this going to fit into one of those principles? The first one is that we wanted the software to be optimized for users. We wanted to be optimized so that the designers were able to do their work smarter, but at the same time, do it in a unique way that kind of opened it up the freedom of the software. And we also wanted to design it so that it's much faster and more efficient. So you can do all of this creative workflow, but you can do it in a much more efficient and fast way. We also wanted to address the way that design software utilized custom control screens. We wanted to provide tools to designers that made their control screen stand out, while at the same time making the design process much easier for people like me who don't necessarily do designs all the time. We wanted to give them the tools that they could very easily create nice looking control screens for their customers really quickly and cost efficiently. And finally, we wanted to take a new approach on how we handled control, both for how we're controlled by devices, but also how we control our devices as well as third-party devices. So with all of that, with those three big pillars kind of put into place, keeping that in mind, keeping that those are kind of the goals we had as we were designing this software, let's jump into the DesignOps software. So this is the Cognio DesignOps software. And there's a lot of unique workflows in it that we'll cover, and there's a lot that we unfortunately won't have time to go over in detail, but feel free if I gloss over something and you have a specific question, throw that in the chat, and hopefully we can look at it at the end. But starting with the design and DesignOps is a little bit different compared to how you may have done this in other traditional softwares. In traditional open architecture design software, you usually start your design by thinking about the hardware first. You drag in a DSP or you drag in a control processor, and when you go in to actually put the processing modules in that, you're kind of defined by the I/O that you have. You have, for a DSP, you might have your inputs to the left and you have your outputs on the right. And in between those inputs and those outputs, you have to kind of force your solution in between that I/O. With DesignOps, we wanted to take a different approach to how we handled that. We didn't want designers to think about being restricted to the I/O or being restricted to the specific hardware. We wanted to allow them to think about the solution first. So in DesignOps, when you want to start your design, you start by adding a space. And a space is really just that. It's an area for you to create a solution. And you may have noticed in here, I have it labeled as an unspecified Cognio device. At this point, this is just a virtual representation of some area that you're going to deploy a solution. And in my site file, I can have multiple spaces. I could have spaces 1 and 2. I could have spaces 1, 2, and 3. I'm not confined to how many areas I want to use. And it's up to you to decide. Maybe you do just want to create a solution in one big space. You can do that. Or maybe you want to think more modular and break things up into things like classrooms. I can go in here and I can take this space, and I might call this Classroom A and give it a unique color. I can take class or space 2 and call that Classroom B. Give that a unique color, and so on. So there's a lot of flexibility with how you actually divvy up your design. And I'm going to go back and talk a bit more specifically about how spaces work. But I think it's best for right now if we just jump into a space and see what you can do with it. So I'll go into my Classroom A and I'll open up my toolkit here on the left. And what you see is a variety of, your standard DSP and control modules. And you also have to the right a gridded system. And that gridded workspace is where you're actually going to be adding your modules. And so I can do that. I can drag an audio input into this design. And you might think to yourself at this point, that's an audio input. I didn't think that I had any hardware associated with this space. So how do I have any audio inputs to it? In DesignOps, all of our audio inputs and outputs are virtually patchable. And what I mean by that is I can go in for this audio input, and I'll actually show you this is our patching interface where I'm going to associate this audio input with an actual piece of I/O. So that could be an analog input. It could be USB inputs. It could be Dante inputs. Any type of actual audio that you want to bring in, you can swap out at any point. So I can create a system that's using a lot of Dante and have a solution here. Later down the road, if my hardware changes and I want to use analog inputs, I can very easily repatch that to one of my analog inputs. Now for this is an unspecified Cognio device, so it has pretty much everything. It's just there for you to kind of play around with. Whenever you have your actual hardware, you would be confined to what that piece of hardware actually has for I/O. So you may have noticed that when I started this, I dragged and I dropped that audio input from the toolkit. And that's cool. That's a way of working that we're all used to. But in DesignOps, remember those pillars. Remember, we want it to work faster, more efficiently. And so in DesignOps, one of the workflows that we've created to support that pillar is this ability to grab multiple cells at one time. And when I do that, they're all highlighted, and I can simply double click my audio input, and all of those cells are populated. And you may have also noticed that when I did that, the selection moves from the left to the right. So DesignOps is looking for you to place more modules. It's assuming you want to continue designing. So with that workflow alone, I'll go through and very quickly just create a very simple 8 in, 8 out design. So I have a gain, an EQ, a limiter, and then I'll throw a matrix mixer in here. And you'll notice the matrix mixer, when I add it, it knows I have 8 cells highlighted. So it's going to give me an 8x8 mixer. If I had 4 cells highlighted and I add that same mixer, that's a normal mixer, but it proves the point. But if I add a matrix mixer here, you'll see that I have a 4 in, 4 out matrix mixer. So I'll highlight these cells again, and I'll just finish my output processing really quickly. I'll throw a EQ, a limiter, and then a delay, and then my audio outputs there. So although this is probably not a award-winning design by any means, if you think about it, just the number of modules that I've put down into the software alone has saved a lot of time. Within 45 seconds of me talking through it, I was able to get too many modules to count for right now. And what you may have also noticed is that there's one thing that I haven't done. Right now, this is a complete signal flow and everything's connected. So what I didn't do is I didn't have to connect any wires. And I can kind of more clearly prove that out. If I highlight some of these and move them around, you'll see that everything's automatically connected. And that's another workflow that we've put into DesignOps to help speed up the process of design, while at the same time actually reducing the amount of errors that someone might make. I don't know if you've opened up different design software and seen, maybe there's a wiring mismatch or some kind of flow that didn't work perfectly. And so whenever you open it, it shows you a warning. This workflow is really designed to help reduce those types of wiring errors. And there are still ways to edit this. Just because something is automatically wired doesn't mean that we can't go in and change anything. So I can take this gain number 4, zoom in a little bit, and I can delete that. And when I do, you'll see that the wire is automatically drawn. anytime there's a module that can be connected upstream from a downstream module, DesignOps will make that connection. But I can also go in, say I wanted to replace this gain module with a graphic EQ. I can very easily replace that. If I wanted to insert a module, for some reason I wanted to insert another graphic EQ, I can do that. And when I do, you'll notice that everything shifts to the right. So this grid system is actually much more dynamic than you might think whenever you first see it. In the realm of being dynamic, having the grid system be dynamic, we've also built in a workflow to all of the modules to act dynamically. And so I can kind of show you, if I make just a really simple system right here, if I just do a audio input, a gain, and then I'll grab my EQ again. If I did, say I built out this 8x8 system and I look at it later down the road and I realize, oh no, input number 9 was supposed to be a stereo input. And I've already built out the system for it to be a mono input. Instead of having to go back and redo a whole bunch of work, in DesignOps, if I open up the modifier panel, which I'll talk about in just a second in detail, but in this modifier panel on the right here, I can take that audio input, and what you'll see is I have the ability to change the number of channels. So if you look kind of closely here, you'll see that there's one little tick mark here, and that's actually a meter that we'll talk about in a second. But right now I have 1 meter. I can update that to 2, to a stereo channel. And now when I go to actually patch that, I'll be able to patch directly to 2 types of I/O, be that a Dante or an analog input. So with that, now I have 2 channels, but if I look upstream, you'll actually see that the other modules have updated themselves to facilitate that stereo signal. So all of these modules, as I'm designing, can update and they can support different numbers of channels. So I'm never building myself into a corner that I can't get out. I always have an option to change the modules dynamically or change the layout of the actual signal flow dynamically. So I can do that with mono to stereo, but I can go as high as 64 channels. So say I had a console with 64 microphones coming in, and they're all Dante, and I need to get all of those into DesignOps. I can bring all 64 of those into this one module. And then where DesignOps becomes really, really powerful, think about that if they are microphones, and say I bring them into the DSP and I just want to do some rough processing on them just to get them ready, I can go in and apply my gain to all 64 of those. Probably more importantly, I can go in and I can apply a high pass filter to all of those. So I can take all 64 of those microphones and in 2 clicks apply a high pass filter to every one of them. When I'm finished with that and I have all of my channels, there are tools built in to DesignOps where I can take what we call a channel splitter, and I can start to fan out all of those 64 channels. So right now I'm utilizing the first 5 channels. So the first 5 Dante inputs from that mixer console, I've added to the splitter, and I can just add these as many as I want. You can see all 64 are actually available. And on the opposite end, we also have channel mergers, which just do the exact opposite. So if I want to merge all of those back together, I can do that. One other kind of interesting workflow we have in here that I think is going to save a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time, for some reason, I've done a lot of designs where I've had to do auto mixing, like within the DSP, but then I also want to duplicate that out and send the same channels to a manual mixer. So kind of an A/B solution where I have auto mix or I have manual mix. For all 64 of these channels, I can molt all of those at one time with one button. So now, and I can add some space in here, I can do whatever processing I want on these first 64, say that's my auto mix section. And then I can route these other 64 out to a console or however I want to use them. So those types of workflows that we've put in really are going to speed up just those monotonous tasks of having to draw wires and make duplicates and get audio in weird places that I wasn't naturally thinking of having to do. So I'll delete this just to clean things up a bit. I'll close this and it should be noted, like I mentioned, there are a lot of other workflows in here. There's a lot of things that you can utilize the modifier panel for, such as you may have noticed as I click on a module, I get the GUI for that module. And the reason behind that is we wanted to reduce the amount of time that people were opening and closing windows. Or probably more importantly, the time people spent looking for a GUI that you've opened. So in DesignOps, we have this one single area that you always know. If I click on a module, boom, there's my parametric EQ. There's my compressor limiter right there on the right. And I can pin things if I'm going to be moving around. I can have that pinned so it's saved right there. And I can open up another one and pin that. But what's cooler, I think, is that I can actually highlight multiple modules and I can see all of them at one time. So I can think about my design through that signal flow, kind of through a channel strip. And that becomes really important. If you're doing something like gain staging and I want to see how's my EQ boost or cut going to affect, well, in this situation, my other EQ, but it could be there's a high, like the compressor limiter. How's that going to affect the compressor later down the signal flow? And I can do that on the horizontal axis. Great. But I can also do that on the vertical axis. So if I want to look at things like time delay, if I want to see how different delays are comparing to others, I can highlight all of those in one column. And as you've probably seen, I can be custom with it. I can choose a gain here, an EQ here. All of it's right there in my modifier panel. So the modifier panel is also a location where when we want to do kind of control and automation of DSP parameters or control parameters. So I'll grab a gain just to keep things simple. In the modifier panel, on the bottom right, you're going to see this plus button. And with this button, you have the ability to do things like link controls, presets. We can even add things to control panels. If I wanted to link a control, so say I had these two gain faders and I want them to operate as a single fader, the workflow for this is really simple. I just drag from one fader to the other. We have two different modes for how we want those, but bidirectional is probably going to be your kind of standard way, where now that these are linked, no matter if I choose which one I move, those are always going to be up to date with each other. We also have the ability to assign things to presets. So if I come in here and I add a preset and I want to assign the state of this fader to that preset, all I do is click it, it's highlighted, and now the state of that fader is now in that preset. Finally, control panels, and we'll talk more about control panel groups in a little bit, but I have a couple options. If I want to, say I know I want this fader on a custom control screen, I can drag it and drop it there. And now it's on that control screen, and you'll see whenever we get into that control screen that it is there. Or I have the option, if I wanted to, say, add the entire module that I'm working with, I can do that. And now it's added to a toolkit within the control screen designer that I can drag in different controls from. So at this point, I have my not so award-winning design, but I'm happy with it. It does everything I want. I've got my controls and my presets and everything. Now, when I actually want to start thinking about hardware, I'll go back to my site view, and we'll pretend just for this webinar that classrooms B and pretend that says C. They also have cool designs in them. I have a few different ways that I can actually associate hardware with these spaces. It might be in this site file that I want to run classroom A on a C20. Okay. Now that device, that processor is going to run that design. Well, it might be for classroom B and classroom C that I want to run both of those on, let's say, a T10C touchscreen. And I want to run both of them on the same touchscreen. And if you're curious about how I'm able to run a DSP design on a touchscreen, that's a good point for you to go look at some of those other webinars where we take a deeper look into the platform. But I have the ability to run both of these spaces on the same design. So when I do that, I get some interesting behavior, some really cool stuff I can do with it, because these spaces can work independently of each other, where I might have to go into classroom B and maybe it's, no one's using classroom B, but I need to do a whole lot of destructive DSP changes. I need to change the entire setup of how it's used. I can take classroom B offline, do those changes, while classroom C runs completely on its own independently, never having any audio drops, never having anything to repush or to change. They're both doing their own separate things. At the same time, if I did want to, I could route audio from any of these spaces to any of the other spaces. So I can kind of prove that out. If I go into my patching dialog, you'll actually see that I have access to those spaces from the patching window. And so if I'm patching from, say, in this situation where these two spaces are running on the same device, well, that's just in the background a digital mult. There's nothing really special about that, nothing to really worry about. If I'm going from the T10C to the C20, in the background, if I make that patch, that's going to utilize a Dante channel. And so DesignOps will route that Dante for you, and it'll just use up one of your available Dante channels. So let's say now in the design process, I've created my not so award-winning design, but I'm happy with it. I've associated with hardware. Now I kind of want to think about the end user and that custom control screen that I'm going to present them with. So in DesignOps, we use what's called control panel groups. And all a control panel group is a collection of control screens. Think of if I had a T10 and I had multiple pages that I'm going to flip through. Those are just your different panels that you'll have within that group. So I'll go in, and you can see I'm presented with another grid system, and here's my fader that I added earlier. On the left, you'll see a toolkit of that other gain module that I added. And then you'll see that I have a collection of unmapped controls. So in DesignOps, everything's remappable. If I have this fader here that we drag from a specific gain module, later down the road, I can reassociate that with an EQ fader or a compressor fader or a different gain control. So if I want to, I can start by adding controls directly from modules, or let's clean this up. I can add controls directly from the toolkit. So these are now unmapped that I can go in and remap to any of those modules. And one of the intentions that we had with these controls is we really wanted to make just the default look and feel of them look really good. Again, if someone like me needs to design something for a customer, I want to be able to not have to think too much about it, but be able to present them something that I feel confident in and that looks really good and ultimately didn't make me spend a lot of time. I'm able to just get the default on there if I want. I mean, it looks nice. Where it becomes much more powerful and quite a bit more fun is when I do want to customize these controls. So with something like this fader, I'll open again, here's my modifier panel. And in the design tab of this, you'll see that I have a lot of different controls and a lot of different modifiers that I can apply to the fader. And for me, what I really like is that these are all on faders. So I can select a different cap, choose this one, and I can choose the size of it. And it's just on a fader. So I don't have to think about real specific numbers. I can just kind of eyeball this in with this fader. I can choose different colors, obviously. And then I have the ability to do things like change the opacity. I can change how much of the bounding box that I'm taking up with the actual control. One of my favorites, and I'll show this just with this meter because I think it's kind of cool. I'll add some segmentation and some spacing in it. I can change the softness, so how the corners are actually rounded. And again, it's just on this fader. I just want to see visually, okay, add a little bit. There, that's perfect for me. And then I can get into the more creative things like glow. I can add a soft glowing effect to this meter here. I can show it kind of a little bit better, but a shadow on the fader cap here, I can increase that just to give a little bit of detail, to give a little bit of pizzazz to something really quickly. That's what DesignOps is all about, is quickly being able to get you in a place where everything's looking a little bit special. Now, of course, I can go in and I can replace that fader cap with an image. If I do want to use an outside piece of software like Photoshop, 100%, I can do that. I can grab that asset, bring it in, and pretty much anything within this design right now can have an image applied to it. Looking down at some of these modifiers, what we did is we saw that there were a lot of modifiers that people were adding to controls manually. So the big one that comes to mind is up and down buttons. 99% of the times that I see a custom control screen, they're adding up and down buttons to a fader. And in the past, what you would do is you would drag in those buttons and you would have to map them to the fader. And then you'd have to make sure that the limits of both of those were matching in the units. And in DesignOps, we made it really easy just to these over a little bit, just to take that fader and with a checkbox, apply that modifier to it. And even with that modifier, I still have the ability to change its size. I can change those buttons to images. So I still have customization over that. I also have things like a label. If again, 99% of the time, I want a label on a fader, so I can very easily just turn that on and I can change the size as well as the position of it. So these are all things that help make the customization process just a lot quicker, a lot more intuitive, without having to think too much about going outside to those outside resources or having to do weird linking. So in DesignOps, thinking again about trying to reduce the repetitive tasks that I have to do, we've also created what we call themes. And themes are really, say I had all those controls and I made a custom look and feel to all of them. Themes are a way to capture that look and feel. And so I can take, if I look here, I have my new control theme. I'll grab something like Dawn, and I'll drag in a control. And you can see that that theme that I've created is applied to all of these controls. And so I can do that from the beginning right there, but I can also highlight them. If I created this, I go, oh, it's not really working for me too much. Maybe I'll go with this neon look, and I get a whole different look and feel. But you can kind of see how important that's going to be. If I'm doing something, the main thing that comes to mind for me is always a college campus, and they're always expanding, and they're always tacking on additional classrooms. And I want the look and feel between all of those classrooms to be the same. So a theme is just an outrageous time saver that I can just dial in the University of Symetrix theme and then just add the controls that I want, and they already have that look and feel. I don't have to worry about creating something a little bit different and getting approval for everything. You know for sure that it's exactly what you've used in the past. So in DesignOps, Symetrix will be making these themes, and we'll have libraries of them available. But we also have the ability for users to make those custom control themes. And that's where I go into the custom control theme manager. And you can see here I have my different themes that I've created in the past. If I want to create a new one, simply add that custom control theme, and then you'll see that I have all the controls that were available in the control panel group. And then I have the ability to select one of those controls, and all of the different properties and the modifiers are there for you to be able to customize it and then save it. If you are, again, like me and truly are not that creative and need a jumping off point, there is also a randomize button that will take all of the parameters and give you a random value for all of them. Let's kind of go through. None of them are really good. This one's kind of cool. And so if you get to something that you kind of like, you can call mine Quinn's theme. And then I can save that and I can export that. And for this one, I probably just want to delete that. But you can share those and you can make your own libraries. So that's going to be a really powerful thing. So the last thing in the software I want to cover, because I want to save time for our Q&A. If I go back into the space, one thing we wanted to make sure we did is we wanted to look at the design process and look at the commissioning and the install process. And we wanted to kind of bridge the gap between them, because right now it's you stop designing and then you pick up later down the road with actually commissioning. So in DesignOps, you may have noticed that in the top right, for the majority of the time I've been in the design mode. I can toggle that over and go into an operation mode. And when I do that, my view changes. I have on the left, instead of my normal toolkit, I now have a status readout. If there were any issues in the system or any problems with hardware, I would see those pull up in a log right here, and I could very easily look at the whole system at one time. And I also have on the bottom here a signal generator. And the signal generator is unique in a few ways. With this, I can go in and I can patch that signal generator into some of my I/O, and you can see I'm actually utilizing those meters that we've talked about before. And what those meters are actually emulating audio, not simulating audio. And I can kind of prove that out by going into this gain and adjusting this DSP parameter. So without being associated with actual hardware at this point, I'm able to generate audio and apply DSP in real time. And that's a really big differentiator for DesignOps. You can see it coming into play for something like this matrix mixer, where I have my inputs and my outputs, and there's nothing coming in on my outputs. So without hardware, I can actually make those cross points and realize my matrix mixer before I'm on site having to troubleshoot anything. So the last thing to talk about, I'm actually going to jump back over to my PowerPoint. And I just wanted to show, kind of talk about how the control process for things. Here are just a few of the control panel groups that we've made to highlight the versatility in a lot of those designs, so not using a randomized generator here, but you have a lot of flexibility to make the control panel groups look really nice. Here's a mapped out one with buttons that you can go into and pull up other screens. Over here, you have that university look and feel. So along with controlling our own products, we also have the ability to control third-party products. So this is something we've done in Composer. We're going to continue doing that in Cognio DesignOps. So we have this big library of control modules that we made for Composer, and it's very easy for us to port those over to be used in DesignOps. So we're still using a Lewis scripting engine. With it, though, does come a lot more APIs. If you're familiar with scripting in Composer, there's new APIs built in to make the workflow a little bit easier. For being controlled by third-party products, we also have a new control protocol for our platform, and that uses a JSON RPC. So if you're familiar with JSON, it's very readable, it's structured, super easy to do batch commands. So if I want to update 100 faders at one time, it's very easy for me to actually just type in a range of controls and update those a lot quicker and easier. Here's just some examples of the modules that we've already made. These are what we've been working on right now. So the PowerSoft Mezzo amplifier, as well as the Shure ULXD. Just to show you, these have all the same functionality of these modules that were in Composer. We've just ported them over, given them a much fresher, newer interface, and allowed them to run on the Cognio platform. So with that said, we've got about 10 minutes left, which I think is pretty perfect timing. And I'll jump over to the Q&A and see if there's anything standing. And John, you can chime in and let me know if you saw anything specific.
Yeah, back to the software on how each module in your signal flow is dynamic. Can you just demonstrate kind of how to, for example, change that 8x8 matrix to an 8x4?
Yeah, so in this situation, I would actually start by removing, when I got 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to get rid of those, and then you'll see I have these add and subtract buttons. So I can just subtract those out, and then I have my 8x4. I could add space in between that if I wanted to keep going. I could add space here at the bottom and then draw out the rest of that.
Another one, Quinn, on how the push-pull process works in Cognio.
Yeah, good question. Usually something I don't have time for actually to get into, but that's a good question. I do have some hardware here. I believe this build will support this, but say I do have a actual piece of hardware, and I'll clean this up just to keep things simple. You can see that I dragged it in and I paired with this C20. And when I actually want to upload the design I've made, what we have is called sync. So sync is kind of your the starting way to kind of think about pushing and pulling, where I can sync, and when I do that, I can either push or pull. So I can either upload my design or I could pull the design from it. It'll ask me to save that. And so I saved that, and I gave 2 capital letters there, but that's okay. So I'll sync that. And you'll see in Just a few seconds. DesignOps, and I don't have time. You'll actually learn a bit more about this in the platform webinars, but you may have noticed just how fast that syncing process was. Because the actual syncing process in DesignOps is really just uploading a configuration file to the hardware. There's no having to compile all the DSP code. It's really just uploading that file. So syncing in DesignOps is absurdly fast compared to our past platforms and other platforms. So excellent question. And I'll even throw in there while we're talking, you might notice here, so I've synced and I'm online with this hardware, and I do have a gauge here at the right here, so 9%. So it's showing that I'm using 9% of the processing capabilities of that C20. So I'm always able to look and see how much I'm using up at any given time.
Another one on renaming those modules in your signal flow. If you rename one of those, will it flow and change other pieces in line with it?
Yeah, so that's on the roadmap. For this build right now, we haven't built that in, but that's something that we'll have. So kind of the workflow of relabel downstream. So I want to call this, mic 1, and then relabel everything down the line. Yeah, we will. We do have, I can kind of show off, I believe it's working in this build, where if I do want to, say, rename all of these, say these are all going to be mic 1 through 8, I can highlight all of those, and then in a similar way to Excel, relabel them automatically. So from mic 1 to 8, DesignOps knew that whenever I typed in a number modifier to the end of that mic label, to go ahead and update everything else that was selected. So we're working on a lot of workflows to help speed up that process.
Say one more for third-party control. Can you just talk through maybe how that's going to work as far as adding it to a design?
Yeah, so controls, third-party control in DesignOps is done through a control panel group. And I wish I had a little bit more time to get into the details behind that, but if I do want to control something, I think I can. I don't have my PowerSoft module in here, but I can add a control panel group and I can export this. And the reason that they are the actual control modules is that you'll see that I can enable scripting on this. So any control panel group can be scriptable. So I can script it with a Lua script to do the third-party control. I can also just do it to do automated things within the CPG, the control panel group itself. So for us, what you would do, say I wanted to control that PowerSoft amplifier, I would import a control panel group that is that PowerSoft CPG, and then within it, I can actually define how many control inputs and how many control outputs it has. So it's similar to pins, basically. I can say it has 4 input pins and 4 output pins. And then within my design, I'll come down here to my control modules. Actually, I think I have them in control IO here. So control inputs and control outputs. And in a similar way that I did audio, I can patch those control inputs to those pins of the CPG, the scripted CPG. So I have one question here that, is it possible to turn off auto connections when modules are added? Right now, no, you can't. If I add a module, it's going to automatically make that connection. And we did that right now just to kind of prove out that workflow. I could see a way of doing things where, okay, I don't want everything to connect right this second, so I'm going to throw my modules in and I'm going to then turn on later to connect everything. So that's actually a good feature that we can look at adding. I have one here, controls for a third-party device, for example, a video switcher. So I do have, if I go back, here's the big list of, not everything, but a good selection of modules we have in Composer that we're currently porting over to DesignOps. So you'll see things like vMix is in there, Philips is in there, AV Pro Edge is in there. Who else has a video switcher? BZB gear. So we have a variety of video switchers that are going to come over from the Composer side of things. So definitely we'll have video switchers. And if you have requests for video switchers that aren't on our website right now, completely feel free to reach out and let us know what products you're working with, and we can try to prioritize some of those. Are you able to turn off the grid layout? So no, you can't turn off the grid layout. And that's really by design. That kind of goes back to trying to avoid making mistakes. With this type of workflow, the grid system really is kind of that foundational layer that you're going to want to be working through. So no, not the ability to turn off the grid. CSS capabilities, that's a good question. And we haven't completely ruled it out. Our main, that pillar that I've been talking about was to be able to make controls look and act awesome very easily without having to do CSS. In the future, if we find that there are specific reasons that people want CSS, we can look into adding that. But right now, the main goal of DesignOps is to get things looking really, really nice without having to do Photoshop or things like CSS. Well, we've got 1 minute time for one last question if anyone wants to throw it in at the end. But other than that, I just want to thank everyone for being here. It's been a real pleasure working on DesignOps, and so it's really exciting for us to be able to take this time and show you all the really cool capabilities that it has. If you do have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to show you anything in DesignOps or answer any questions that you might have. So thank you very much to everyone for being here.